Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Wairarapa Policy Working Group Class 4 Gambling and Standalone TAB Venues Policy Hearings and Deliberations meeting on Monday, the 15th of April. I'd just like to open the meeting with a karakia. Mai iti paimonga araro ke te tai, mai iti awa tonga araro ke te awa raki, tene e tahapuri, awhi ai e taratahi. Whano, haere mai te toki, homie, hui, tae kie. Okay, so just a quick overview. Once the hearings are concluded, the working group, we will adjourn for deliberations. And then we will reconvene around 11:30. Timing might be a little bit fluid depending on, we only have 4 submitters now this morning. The meeting is being recorded and it will be made available on all of the 3 councils' websites after the meeting. As we are being recorded, and for those that are going to come and view a little later, it'd be really nice if the committee can introduce themselves. So I'll start. I'm Robin Cherry Campbell, Councillor of Carterton District Council and Chair for the Policy Working Group. So
Martin Bosley, South Wairarapa District Council Councillor.
Steve Cretney, Carden District Councillor.
Craig Bowyer, Marston District Councillor.
Tim Nelson, Marston District Councillor.
Melissa Sadler-Footer, currently acting mayor.
South Wairarapa. Thank you. So just a quick run through. The hearings information provided to submitters is in the agendas from page 119 onwards. And submitters have 10 minutes, which will include question time. And we invite the submitters to speak in support of their submissions. They're not expected to read out their submissions. Just a reminder for the members of the committee that we need to approach these hearings or this hearing with an open mind, and that we take into account all of the written and the oral submissions when it comes to our deliberations later. If we can listen to the submitters, and then we're only here to ask questions to clarify anything that they are submitting on, and if we wish them to elaborate on points. This is not for us to comment on their submissions or engage in debate with submitters, and often submitters will ask us questions. So just a reminder that we're not here to answer their questions, we are here to ask questions of them. So that's just a quick overview. Moving on through the agenda, we actually have no apologies. We have a full committee around the table, so we can scrap that one. And moving on, any conflicts of interests from any of the members that they wish to declare? There being no conflicts. The next item on the agenda is our reports for decision. And that's Wairarapa Class 4 Gambling and Standalone TAB Venues Hearings Report, page 3. And our first item on the agenda is the hearings report. We now only have 4 submitters, 3 of whom will be joining us via Teams. Our first one is scheduled for 10:10. We're hoping that he may come in a little earlier. And then we have 1 submitter who will be coming in person. Over to you, Steph.
Thank you. I think Robin has summarised it nicely. So this report is presenting the submissions, all the submissions received on the policy during the consultation period, which ran from the 19th of February through to the 22nd of March. So in total, I think 23 submissions were received. So you've got those there for you as an attachment as part of the report. And today, as Robin has said, an opportunity to hear from those submitters who wish to speak in support of their submission. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I see that. Jared, welcome. I see you've joined us online.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. You will be our first submitter. Are you ready to sort of go relatively soon?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so this is Jared True from the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand. So welcome and thank you for your submission. Just a reminder, you have 10 minutes to submit, so 7 minutes to present, and if you'd like any questions, allow sort of 3 minutes for questions. A bell will ring after the 6 minutes just to let you know how much time that you have left. So
Right.
Jared, welcome and over to you.
Thank you. Are you able to see my presentation?
We
on the
can
screen there?
indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Jared True. I represent the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand. We're asking you today to consider and adopt option 3 in the report. That would see the current relocation provision being retained, but have a sensible amendment which provides that venues can't relocate to highly deprived areas outside a town centre. Given the figures in the social impact assessment, we're also considering it's now time to come to replace the sinking lid with a cap at current numbers. And I note throughout the district, your venue numbers and machine numbers are now extremely low, with only 10 venues across the entire district. It was fantastic that council did the background work and got a high quality social impact assessment report. When you look at that report supports a lessening of the restrictions. It certainly doesn't support any more adverse or intense restrictions being imposed. All the key metrics in that report were positive. We've seen a 62% reduction in problem gambling help seeking since 2017 locally. All your 3 districts are popular, of course, and experiencing population growth, and that naturally reduces the number of machines per head of population. As far as gaming machine profits go, the number of profits per person in the Wairarapa region is less than the national average, and it's less than your neighbouring districts. And we've also seen lower levels of growth in gaming and revenue than your peers in your neighbouring districts. In relation to the relocation provision, it's important that be retained. Relocation is a harm minimisation tool. The ability to relocate venues and retain their machine numbers was an initiative by the Maori Party as part of the Gambling Harm Reduction Amendment Bill. The aim was to give venues the option to move away from unsuitable areas such as highly deprived areas or residential areas or areas close to a sensitive site, and to move to areas where council considered that to be more sensible. The current relocation policy is entirely sensible. It was adopted after a full public consultation process. There's been nothing since the last review, nothing over the last 3 years, no new evidence or new concern that would justify a major change in policy. The current policy is reasonable, adopted after a full public consultation process. The existing relocation provision has extensive safeguards. We can only relocate if we're able to show that the character of the district is not going to be adversely affected. We can't relocate any of our venues that will be close to a sensitive site, such as a kindergarten, a school, worship, or other community facility. Every relocation application currently requires there to be public notification and a public hearing. Every relocation application requires the applicant to put forward a social impact statement. And of course, we can only relocate in extraordinary circumstances: a fire, a flood, an earthquake, or public works acquisition. All of those are entirely appropriate, and extensive safeguards are already in place. Relocation, of course, has considerable benefits. It enables venues to move out of high deprivation areas, move away from residential areas, or move away from sensible sites. There's simply no good policy reason why you would want to stop venues doing that. Venues should also be free to move to new, modern, smaller premises. When we move to a newer, smaller premise, that's likely to have a harm minimisation benefit, as those newer venues tend to attract a more affluent clientele, a clientele that's probably less likely to be at risk of suffering from gambling-related harm. If we enable venues to relocate to new, modern premises, that's also just great for the local economy. It creates employment, it creates tourism, it creates a vibrant township and a vibrant place to go and socialise. There are also a number of health and safety reasons why we'd want venues to continue to be able to relocate. It's entirely fair and entirely reasonable to allow a venue to relocate out of a building that's earthquake prone or it's dangerous or unsanitary. If we don't allow relocations, that's not going to result in fewer machines. It will simply entrench those venues and those machines in unsafe premises. Unsafe to both the public to go and visit those premises, but also unsafe to the staff that work in those premises. In relation to whether we carry on with the sinking lid or look to adopt a cap, Your machine numbers have already declined considerably. Masterton's had a 20% reduction since 2015. Carterton, their machines have halved since 2015. And South Wairarapa has also had a 33% reduction. So given that those significant reductions already, time has now come to consider a cap. Our problem gambling rate in New Zealand is extremely low by international standards. The problem gambling rate is only 0.2% of the adult population. There's no clear link between gaming machine numbers and problem gambling rates. Over the last 10 years, we've seen 25% of our machines removed. However, in the same 10-year period, the problem gambling rate has remained the same, it's plateaued. Considerable benefit that comes from having our machines. People enjoy playing the machines, it's entertainment. Close to 70% of adult New Zealanders gamble at least once a year. And our machines, 100% of the profits go back to the local community groups, sporting groups, and that creates extremely valuable funding. Adopting a more restrictive policy is unlikely to reduce problem gambling, but will accelerate the migration to offshore-based online gambling. And you may be aware that the government has already announced an in-principle decision to license offshore-based online gambling, which will see even more growth. The government's introducing an online gambling tax of 12%, and coming into effect on the 1st of July. When I met with the policy advisors, the Department of Internal Affairs that are advising the Minister on the new changes, they said there's already 3,000 active participants in the online space, actively engaged with New Zealand customers. And we can see that from the reports that have come through, that the reports show that 27% of adults are participating in some form of online gambling, with 19% of that group doing it weekly. And we had the ultimate case study when we had COVID. When we had COVID and our physical venues were closed, we could see what happened with the migration to the online spend. Sky City has an offshore-based online casino. Its revenue from its online casino is publicly available because it's a publicly listed company. You have a look at their annual reports, it details what the revenue is from its online casino. In 2018, it was $254 million. When our venues were closed and you couldn't go to any of our physical venues, that spend leaped up to close to $800 million and has remained high at those levels post the COVID lockdowns. Having a policy that accelerates the growth of online gambling is clearly undesirable. There's no local grants that come from that, no local employment that's generated. Currently, no taxes, and from the 1st of July, that will only be a 12% duty as opposed to the 20% duty that gaming machines pay. Currently, no harm minimisation regulations or controls. Currently, very large prizes and plenty of inducements to gamble. We go sign up, deposit $100 into your account, and they'll match it with another $100. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Jared. That was a great presentation. I will open up to my fellow members for any questions.
No questions. Thanks, Jared.
Tim, any questions?
No, not for me.
Thank you. I think that was, great presentation, and the information was interesting, very much so. Thank you so much for your time today. Really, really appreciate it. You're welcome to stay online and listen to the other 3 submitters that we have. But I also understand that you're probably very busy, so feel free to stay online. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is John Prendergast from Trust House, who will be here in person. He's scheduled to be here at 10:20. So we will just wait for his arrival. Are we able to let the other submitters know? Joel?
Yes, I think so.
Welcome.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Well done.
Give yourself a few minutes.
Yeah, no, right.
But whenever you're ready, just feel free to come up to the table and yeah. Nice. Yeah. So welcome. We have John Prendergast from Trust House Limited. John, just to let you know, you've got 10 minutes to make a submission, 7 minutes to present, and then sort of leave some time for questions if you would like. And a bell will ring in about 6 minutes, just to let you know where you're going time. So thank you very much for your time today. And
Thank you, Robin. Kia ora tātou. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk with you this morning. As Robin has said, I'm John Prendergast. I'm the new CEO of Trust House, but I've discovered I'm not that new, actually. I've been here 9 months now, so I'm a slightly used trustee, CEO of Trust House. And here to talk, obviously, this morning about gambling and about the proposed policy change that Marsden District Council in particular are proposing to the policy, which revolve, and our concern around that proposed change isn't around, we don't want the ability to permanently relocate machines. We have no intention or desire to permanently relocate machines, but what we would ask for is for the policy to be slightly amended so that it enables temporary relocation of machines. And we have had this instance in the past in different locations where we had one premise where we needed to do some seismic strengthening of a building, and so it was necessary for us to temporarily move out of that building, move the machines out of that building. And then we were able to move them back once the work had been done. The way the policy amendment is currently framed wouldn't seem to enable that to happen. And so a temporary unavailability of the premises would result in a permanent end to the ability to have the machines in that area. But that's the crux of our request. It's for we don't think it's a major change, but that's the change that we would like and the rationale for it. Just in terms of Trust House, our reason for being is to manage the public interest sensitive community products. And so we started with alcohol in 1947 when Masterton came out of 40 years of prohibition. 1989, we added gaming to that portfolio of sensitive community products. And then 10 years later, in 1999, we bought the Housing Corporation's portfolio of state houses as they were. So that's what we're about, is managing carefully and in the community's interest those alcohol, gaming, social housing. Some people say that there's a contradiction in our balance sheet, if you like, that on one hand we're trying to provide good for the community by providing social housing. On the other hand, we're ripping money out of the people's back pockets through gaming. And I guess it comes back to what we exist for. Alcohol and gaming are legal activities in New Zealand. We think it is in the community's interest to have an organisation like Trust House that is embedded and lives in this community, managing those two sensitive products. We do so, and the benefit for the public interest is that they are well managed, responsibly managed. We minimise harm as far as we possibly and reasonably can, and certainly over and above the requirements of the law. The benefits from a financial perspective from gaming for the community are fairly evident in terms of the grants that get distributed back to the communities. So if the policy as it's currently worded were to go through, and we did have a temporary need to relocate that became a permanent need to relocate, it has a material impact. It would have a material impact on the availability of grant funding for community projects. And that's our concern. We fully and readily acknowledge council's sinking lid policy, and that's a widespread approach to gaming around the country. And no issue at all with that. And over time, what that means, of course, is that gaming, on-premise gaming in communities is going to reduce. What it also means is that online gaming is going to increase. I just made the point that there aren't the same harm minimisation regulations and requirements. If you're gambling in your lounge, it's quite different to gambling in a regulated premise where you've got other people watching you, but you've also got the venue operator, as in Trust House, actively looking to minimise and mitigate any harm minimisation that might occur. How I'm going with my 7 minutes, but that was really the point, and I'm conscious that you've had the submission, so you would have read the submission, so I don't need to regurgitate all of it.
That's good.
But happy to answer any questions. If anyone has any questions?
Councillors, any questions?
Thanks, John. What's one way that you deliberately do reduce harm if, say, someone's gambling in one of your venues?
Well, there's the new requirements now that mean that we have to, and we do anyway, but we have to keep an eye and keep a record of everyone that's in the gaming machine room. So every 20 minutes, we do a sweep of the room to see who's in there. And if anyone's in there for 9 of those sweeps, if we go in at 9 o'clock and you're sitting there, and then we go in 3 hours later, having done 9 sweeps, and you've been there consistently throughout that time, we will speak with you and just talk about harm minimisation, problem gambling, and that's a requirement on our staff now. There's a requirement that people can only make 1 ATM withdrawal per day in venues. So we have to, and we do manage that. This come from the Kiripuni Sports Bar, and we've been talking about exactly this actually. We pay a levy from the proceeds of gaming to the Problem Gambling Association. So there's a raft of regulated measures to endeavour to minimise harm to gaming. I'm aware that in 2 of the councils, the proposed change is that gaming machines can't relocate to low socioeconomic areas. We don't have any gaming machines in Wairarapa and low socioeconomic areas. It's not an issue that impacts on us, and we wouldn't want to move them to low socioeconomic areas as well. I guess the community accountability that we have too, that we are a community-owned, public-facing organisation. There's accountability at the ballot box every 3 years, but there's also accountability through the likes of the Wairarapa Times Age, keeping us on our toes. There's accountability when you go to the supermarket and someone bails you up and says, what the hell did you make that decision for? Or why do you do that? So there's a whole different mesh of accountability that we have as a local community-owned, community accountable organisation.
Thank you.
Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lisa.
John, sorry, just your proposed amendment to the clause around being able to temporarily relocate. Do you have in mind perhaps a parameter for how long that temporary relocation could be? Would it be reasonable to put a time frame on that?
It would seem sensible to put a time frame on it, but it could be problematic. I guess you could say 3 months or something like that, but it's difficult to anticipate.
Mm.
If it was a fire and the place burnt down, then you might need 12 months, for example. If it was a flood and you need a couple of weeks for it to dry out, so it's just difficult.
Yeah, no, I just thought it might be sort of feel like a safeguard to say a business can relocate for a maximum of 12 months or something like that, so that you know that temporary has a very defined.
Yeah, or another option that change the wording, even if the word permanent were to be added to the current wording, so that there's a prohibition against permanent relocation. It's another possibility.
Thank you, that's lovely.
Any other questions? Nothing for me, Craig?
No.
John, thank you so much for your time and
Thank
your
you.
presentation.
Sorry, I'm late. I got stuck behind a moving house.
Oh, no, you weren't. We're actually running ahead of schedule, so we sort of.
I'll withdraw that apology there.
No, so you weren't late at all, definitely not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Rob.
So our next submitter is Samantha Alexander from the Lion Foundation, and I see Samantha has joined us online. Thank you for coming in a little bit earlier. We're running ahead of time, which is rather nice on a hearings process.
Always a good meeting.
Yes, I think short meetings are good meetings, aren't they?
Indeed.
Just to let you know, so welcome. You have 10 minutes your entire sort of presentation. So if you allow about 3 minutes for any questions, and at about 6 minutes, a bell will ring just to let you know where you're at with your timing. And Samantha, welcome, over to you.
Thank you. Kia ora, everybody. Firstly, we do appreciate the opportunity to make a submission and then to be heard in this way as well. Look, I'm not going to sit here and regurgitate my our submission. Suffice it to say, the Lion Foundation has been around and for an extensive period of time. We operate only 9 gaming machines at one venue in the combined 3 areas, which is in Carterton. And just this morning again, we have recommended a distribution of grants to some really good causes in the area. I think what I'd like to focus on this morning, I have done a bit of a PowerPoint, which I see this very angry red on a Monday morning is quite intense. We definitely do not grow. Look, we're not here to grow gambling. We don't try and put gaming machines in each and every venue as far as possible. We understand, we work with our venue operators who are, especially in the case of Carterton, they're local members of the community. They provide a social outlet, a social recreational outlet as well, to not only people who gamble in their venue, but people who come in to drink and to socialise, etc. It is my humble belief that they have the community's interests at heart, and the safe environment which they create, which has now further been amplified by the harm minimisation regulations, which I'm sure you've heard tons about this morning. There is a lot of effort being put into making sure that those people who come into our physical venues to gamble, to have a go, that those that are suffering harm are protected as much as humanly possible. That doesn't mean, however, that we are blind to the fact that there is harm in gambling. There is harm across horse racing, dog racing, any betting, and there will be for centuries to come, I have no doubt, because that's how it's always been. So we do verily believe that there is a low incidence of problem gambling. If you look at all of the research that is out there, New Zealand ranks amongst some of the lower for rates of problem gambling. And the one thing New Zealand does exceptionally well is it's quite a unique funding model, whereas it's not really for commercial gain at all. It is the Gambling Act authorises and insists on distribution to authorised purpose. So we are a broad spectrum, a broad sector funder. We fund across all sport, education, health and community and arts. For example, your Featherston Booktown Festival is something which we've always been very proud to fund because of the fact that it just brings so much to the community. So look, essentially we've jumped on the bandwagon here. to let you know, first of all, what the good in the community comes, what funding, what good the funding can do in the community. And secondly, whilst you are looking to review the wording of your policy to make it more clear, we've jumped on the bandwagon as well and saying, well, if you've opened that door, then we would like to have just to talk to you about having a capped policy. We don't believe a sinking lid policy really does anything, changes anything. And I think the research which informs the problem gambling levy, which was conducted by Malatest International, shows in 2021 or 2020 that the problem gambling rates haven't decreased. Population has grown and those numbers are staying the same. So we kind of, in that, when we were consulted for them by the Ministry of Health and Malatest, I know a large group of us, including the Gaming Machine Association of New Zealand, all got together and we begged the ministry to do things differently. What has happened in the meantime is that the Salvation Army, the Oasis contract, was cancelled. Which for us is actually quite disturbing because that's now taken further face-to-face counselling opportunities out of your communities for people who are suffering from problem gambling. The Salvation Army have a history of really good support and really good counselling with members who suffer from problem gambling. And having their contract withdrawn and not renewed at the end of January, we wonder how that is the ministry doing things differently. But look, time will tell, and we just hope that the 4 remaining providers can actually get boots on the ground and provide the face-to-face counselling that these the addicts with a bunch of comorbidities actually need. They need the face-to-face. It's not really good enough just to pick up a phone. But the point being that the gambling rates, in our opinion, haven't really changed. And unfortunately, in the 3 years that have passed since the most recent Malatest inquiry and setting of the new levy, there's been no further research which supplements any information pertaining to the incidence of problem gambling. We'd also like to suggest, as was done in Tauranga in December 2023, that you strongly consider retaining your relocation clause. The relocation clauses in policies are a really good harm prevention tool, and they also support the businesses in the sense that, you know, there's nothing more alarming than a landlord who knows he's got the venue operated by the proverbial short and curlies, exerting that additional pressure on increased rents for not fit for purpose buildings. I'm not necessarily saying that's the case in our venue, but we have definitely had a history of that. So we would urge you, we don't believe there's been any fundamental reason for you to not adopt or retain your current relocation policy. And I do apologize, in my slides, point 2 on one of the pages says relocations into the central area zone. I don't know what I was actually on about there, so I do apologize for that. Yes, it's been a strange time, but there are a lot of reasons why relocations can be, if used correctly, they can extend the control of the local council to ensure that the gambling venues are placed in places where they are going to do the least amount of harm. I've often heard my colleagues also say that the reason some of the venues are in areas of low deprivation is because that's where they've always been, and without a relocation clause, that's where they're always going to stay. So it's a question of, you know, giving the council the authority, subject to giving the council the discretion more than authority, because you've already got that, the discretion to determine where a venue can move to, considering all sorts of factors as opposed to a blanket no. Sometimes we feel that that's a better option in the case of ensuring that the communities are protected. I think you would have had an abundance of abundance of submissions saying that, you know, on the one side, the gambling rates are increasing. On the other side, they're staying the same. We submit that the research definitely says that they've stayed the same, because there's nothing else out there to suggest otherwise. We also believe that even though the recent gambling harm regulations have whilst they are complicated and in certain instances impractical, we do believe that they're going to add an extra layer. Once all of the inconsistencies and once all the language is really understood and thought about and implemented in a proper way, we do believe that that's going to add an extra layer into the physical supervised gaming room, as opposed to the elephant in the room, which just simply has to be the offshore online unregulated gambling opportunities that even for someone, you'd like to think that my 13-year-old daughter can't open a Facebook account because she's not she's not over the age, well, she's underage. Well, yeah, that was a learning curve for me too, because they can open these things and these kids can access gambling websites. They, have parents' credit card, can do. And I think that's come very clearly through all of the recent news reports, with Westpac even saying millions of dollars is being spent offshore. That was Westpac, BNZ not too long ago as well. So there are millions of dollars which are being spent offshore. We get no benefit from, there's no benefit to the community from these funds, and there's certainly no protections available. So that for us is a really, it's a heavy, high risk. And I know that the government is going to try and regulate it, but that is a long way off. But simply closing these physical environments, dare I suggest, is slightly naive to think that just because someone can't go and gamble at a class 4 at a pub in Carterton, that they're not going to travel to Wellington to do the same. So yeah, and then finally, just in regards to our funding, we appreciate that the funding, I call it the cesspit of funding, because we all do things so very, very differently. At TLF, we've made it our mission to educate funders. In fact, I'm coming up to Wellington shortly for an Upper Hutt funding forum at a marae. We try and educate the vast number of organisations out there who simply do not have the ability in most instances to navigate what I call the cesspit of grant funding, because it is complex, it is soul destroying. When you get that no across your desk and you have no idea why. But then on the other hand, there's some fantastic stories, and we would urge you to, if you have received any submissions from any local organisations, I don't know what other sustainable alternatives there are to this funding. And we have seen that when a venue closes, the amount of income available or the amount of funding to distribute is substantially less. We've just seen that in the Upper Hutt. Unfortunately, one of our venues has had to close its doors because the council has not renewed its lease. And that's a huge loss to that specific council area. And as I say, I think it's naive to think that just because the venue's closed that people won't go elsewhere or go online. So I've highlighted, for example, the most recent grant, which was given to Wellington Free Ambulance in the amount of $50,000 for the station in Masterton, even though we do not have a venue in Masterton, because we believe in funding what is beneficial for a community. And we know that people from South Wairarapa, Carterton, they're going to use that facility, and that's what the distributed funds does.
Samantha, thank you so much for your very fulsome presentation. Really, really great. We can tell the passion that you have as well. And I will hand over to my fellow members if there are any questions for Samantha.
Hey, I've got one. Thank you, Samantha. You may have already said this when you talked about that venue getting shut down in the Hutt, I think, but has offshore gambling led to a reduction in gambling in your venues, so they're still open? Have you got
Look, it's difficult to say what has led to a reduction. We have seen in the last 6 to 8 months a decline in revenue of about 15% across the Wellington region particularly. But we're also seeing a national decline, and we're attributing it to a lot of factors. Fundamentally, though, the cost of living crisis, because ultimately people need to go into the pubs to have a beer, to have a punt, and we're seeing, especially in the Wellington region, that they aren't doing that. Even I've inserted a little excerpt of the Malatest report, where it clearly says that they've conducted lived in experience inquiries and research 3 years ago, and it was very strong already that people don't have to go out anymore to enjoy what they like to do, the gambling. So I can't tell you exactly that our revenue has declined because it's gone online. That would be, I just can't say for definite. I think there is a component in it, most definitely. The people who like to gamble, though, are still going to come out and gamble. We know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Samantha, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
You wanted to stay online and listen to our last submitter, you are more than welcome.
No, I'll let him have the room.
Fabulous. Thanks a lot, Samantha.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Perfect segue. Welcome, Niall. So we have Niall Miller from TAB New Zealand. Niall, we have 10 minutes for you to make your submission, and so if you allow about 3 minutes for any questions, a bell will or an alarm will ring at sort of 6 minutes just to let you know where you're at for your time. And sorry, we've just got a couple of councillors trying to plug in laptops under the table. So I hope they don't distract you. Yeah, they're trying to escape, they're hiding.
What an agency. Thanks.
Yeah. So Niall, welcome and over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just swap over to my presentation. Hopefully that's popping up, is it? Or
it is indeed. Yep.
Excellent. Cool. So good morning, everyone. I'm Niall from the TAB. The TAB has had many name changes over the last few years, but we are now called TAB New Zealand, which is a statutory body established under the Racing Industry Act of 2020. And we're here to perform the various statutory functions, including betting and broadcasting of race meetings in New Zealand and providing gaming services. This current year, we are anticipating to deliver funding to the New Zealand racing industry of around $230 million and an additional $25 million to the national sporting organisations of New Zealand. During the last racing season up till the 31st of July 2023, we generated a value add contribution to the New Zealand economy of $1.87 billion and sustained employment for over 13,500 people. On the 1st of June last year, TAB and Entain commenced into a strategic partnership whereby effectively Entain will run the betting and broadcasting services on behalf of the TAB for the next 25 years. They will deliver racing and sports betting to New Zealand, both at a retail level and a account online level. And they'll also sort of be our sort of people on the ground when it comes to our gaming operation. The gaming operation is retained by TAB New Zealand, but they obviously will now run the stores and will be responsible for the operations. This partnership, obviously, it will inject a lot of money into both racing and sports across the country, and is a deeply needed investment for that. When it comes to the Wairarapa district gambling policy, it obviously retains to just TAB venues or standalone venues, which are defined as a venue owned or leased by TAB New Zealand and used primarily for racing or sports betting purposes. They are distinctly different from obviously the racetrack betting or social venues at pubs and clubs across the country, of which there are around 450. And obviously separate again from our online account services. TAB standalone venues are effectively just larger spaces to provide more odds and more race form for our customers to digest when they're making their betting decisions. We warmly invite the council to retain the ability for us to establish at least one venue in the greater district, and we also would like to have a more robust relocation policy that strikes the balance between minimising the potential for harm, but also allowing a business to adjust to conditions that might be outside of their own control. We believe a capped TAB venue policy of at least one in the district is reasonable. There's a current environment of good governance regulation, including that TAB statutory obligations do include the minimising of gambling harm. New Zealand's gambling rate is quite small by international standards, at about 0.2% of the adult population. TAB betting presentations account for around 10% of that. And so it's even lower from a betting point of view. The restrictions in a physical environment can accelerate the migration to online uncontrolled websites, and we would like to avoid that. And we would like to ensure that gambling is done through trusted, transparent operators. Harm from gambling is minimised and put at the front of mind, and the returns from the community, the returns from the gambling, are returned to the community. TAB also contributes both from the gaming and from the betting to the problem gambling service levy. This levy is around $20 million a year, and it is ring-fenced solely to help with the minimising of gambling harm. When it comes to harm minimisation, the TAB, especially in the last sort of 9 months, has worked very hard at making sure that this is front of mind. Part of the Entain deal included a $5 million ring-fenced initiative from ourselves to make sure that harm minimisation was at the front of mind. We have statutory requirements to obviously minimise harm. All of our standalone venues are installed with facial recognition technology, so we can recognise people who shouldn't be in there. All of our staff have always had problem gambling training. Automatic teller machines are prohibited from TAB New Zealand standalone venues, so you don't have quick access to cash or credit. We all have our stores connected to CCTV, so we can obviously view our stores from both a cash security and harm minimisation point of view, AML and things like that. We don't serve alcohol or sell alcohol in our stores, and TAB stores usually have very modest trading hours. With the offshore gambling risks, TAB knows for sure that we lose around $200 million a year to overseas offshore betting providers, mainly in Australia. And we also believe that there's $700 million lost in the offshore online casino type websites. It is important that any policy, obviously from a council point of view, understands that this market is growing and growing at a phenomenal rate, and any restrictions, while the government doesn't have a plan in place at the moment to address this, that there is a risk that this can push people to unregulated, untaxed, unsupervised websites that don't have many returns or safety nets for their customers. Backing a trusted provider is obviously the best way to ensure that our gambling is done safely and that the returns to the community are maximised. So when it comes to online offshore operators, we believe that there's $700 million going offshore currently, and that's an 18% growth on the year before. And you can see from the last few years that it is growing at a phenomenal rate, based both on annual card payments and the deposits into these websites. Web traffic also to various online casino sites also grows, with around that average at the moment of 3.5 million visits per month, which is obviously a phenomenal rate. This sort of mainly started back in COVID, when there was obviously there was no sports, there was no racing, so people wanted to go online. The biggest way that we can sort of look at comparing online market is to use SkyCity. SkyCity has a online casino based out of Malta. They don't hide this. They add it in their annual report, and that is at the moment is making them about sort of $25 million a year. And they currently, we estimate that they make up about 4% of this market, with Jackpot City and Casumo being the front runners there. So this is obviously a way to just sort of illustrate that whilst gambling is something that can be enjoyed and done, but there is a growing beast in the dark corners, and especially in an unregulated market.
That's 6 minutes.
Cool. I think that's happy to answer any questions now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Niall. Do we have any questions? Niall? Niall, I actually have one question. You've stated that you would like for the Wairarapa councils to allow for the establishment of at least one TAB New Zealand venue within our district. Is that something that TAB were considering installing prior to us doing these deliberations?
The policy, no. I think it's something to consider. There's two parts of it. Obviously, with Entain coming on board, they're reassessing the retail footprint and how we offer things. Obviously, there's several pubs and clubs around the Wairarapa that do have our services within them, and that's everything from a self-service terminal to what we call them crudely a manned terminal, which is actually a person serving the bet. And they're assessing how they do that and providing our network. Unfortunately, our equipment was getting very old and failing, so we were sort of condensing the number of venues that we had. So they'll look at what they want to do. From a TAB New Zealand point of view, we'd obviously love to retain the right to have a store in case anything happens to one of our primary offerings in pub venues, whether or not we had a disconnect with the publican, money went missing, there's a natural disaster. We've obviously got AML obligations as well that we need to make sure customers need to be identified when they claim large sums of money. And if anything like that went outside of our control, we would obviously love to have the ability to have a standalone venue, or the ability to establish one should we need it.
Right. And one final question. How many standalone venues does the TAB New Zealand have in New Zealand?
Across the country, we have 44 at the moment.
Great, thank you.
Just more about a question about the relationship with Entain, who don't exactly have a great track record for compliance with AML regulations and meeting the obligations around safe gambling. And they were fined £17 million in the UK last year. Second time in 3 years they breached their regulations there. How do you intend to manage that kind of relationship? And
so we obviously have very robust reporting conditions that they have. They acknowledge that the global group dropped the ball in the UK. And there was an incident in Australia a number of years ago as well that they obviously were sort of caught short, to be frank. And they've addressed that. They've put their hand up and they've moved on. It's a little bit sort of different in the sense that New Zealand has very tight sort of regulations, and they are fully aware of them, and they are running it's a privilege to run our operation on our behalf. And so they're very aware of that and very front of mind. The $5 million budget that was put up that had to be ring-fenced for minimised gambling is a show of support for that and addressing that and keeping that at the front of mind. The introduction of the facial recognition technology obviously makes things a hell of a lot easier for us to identify people based on the facial structures of their face, rather than having to rely on a gallery of people where a photograph could be 10 years old, or they could be wearing a hat or something like that. So they are very aware of that. It's unfortunate that it did occur, but they've put their hand up and they've addressed that.
Thanks, Noel.
Any other questions? No, thank you so much for your time this morning and for speaking to your submission. Really, really appreciate it. And the next part of our meeting will be moving to deliberations. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
That's the end of our 4 submitters. So I will move to the recommendations in the officer's report. And we have one recommendation with 2 parts. The recommendation is that we receive the full set of submissions on the Wairarapa Class 4 gambling and standalone TAB venues policy in attachment 1. We note that 23 submissions were received, and we note that 4, not 5 submitters were confirmed and have been heard in accordance with the hearing schedule and procedure in attachment 2. Do I have anyone that would like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Cretney. Thank you to Councillor Boyer. Everyone in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion is carried. So we'll take a brief adjournment now. I know it does say in our agenda till 11:30, but do we just sort of want 10 minutes? Is that enough? So if we reconvene at 11:05?
Cup of tea.
Fantastic. Thank you.